Hi, my name is Daniel Gomez Ibanez, and I was one of the founders of the Parliament of Religions back in the late 80s, and was part of the first board of directors. I think I was on the board until about the year 2000, as a matter of fact. But after Charles Nolly, who was our first board president, I was elected president of the board in the second year of the Parliament's existence, and then became executive director for about 2.5 years through the Parliament. And after the Parliament, I was simply one of the board members. At any rate, I'm happy to reminisce a little bit about what happened back then to get it all started. When we first got the idea for the Parliament, and we weren't really the first ones, but we were the first to be able to actually bring it about. That was around 1987, and I was one of a number of devotees at the Hindu monastery in Hyde Park. And the idea literally took shape around the kitchen table in the monk's kitchen of the Hyde Park monastery, because the non-Western religions all understood that their origins and their visibility in the West could be traced back to 1893, to the first World's Parliament of Religions that happened as part of the Chicago World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition in that year. And they wanted to do something to celebrate the centenary. So the very first people who got involved were people from the communities representing non-Western religions. There were Buddhists, there were Jains, Muslims, Hindus, and from there the idea spread to include a huge diversity of religious organizations and beliefs. And people came from all over eventually. But even when I was promoting the Parliament abroad, I realized that there was a lot more awareness of the Parliament overseas than there was in the United States, even though the 1893 Parliament had been a singular event for the history of religion in America, not only because it introduced the non-Western religions for the first time in authoritative ways to the West, but also because for the first time Jews and Catholics were accepted as part of the mainstream religious currents in the United States. They were put on the platform alongside the Protestant majority of the time. So when you ask what interfaith culture was like, we had to learn that because we were a bunch of amateurs simply trying to celebrate a centenary. But very quickly we learned that there was an existing interfaith culture and many interfaith organizations both in North America and internationally, and we started reaching out to them. And I remember that early on we were making plans for the Centenary Parliament, and we invited interfaith representatives from around the United States to come to Chicago to help us plan. And we had put together a tentative budget for our Parliament celebration, and this would have been about 4 or 5 years before the actual Parliament happened in 1993. And we figured that there would be, we would charge X number of dollars to register for the Parliament, and I think if I recall our budgets correctly, we figured there'd be 400 or 500 people in attendance. And immediately there was silence around the big table, and everybody else said, "You must be crazy," because an interfaith gathering would never succeed in assembling as many as 400 people. So you've got to revise your projections and your budget. But as you know, it turned out to be very different. It was, in the end, the largest and most diverse gathering of religious people and religious leaders that has ever happened in the world. And we had to start turning people away because the Chicago Fire Department said we were exceeding the limits for how many people we could have at the Palmer House Hotel and the other venues. In the end, somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 people were registered for the Parliament. Many more attended when we had our plenary session in Grant Park. But we had to turn away lots of people. So, interfaith culture at that time consisted mainly in local, city-wide interfaith groups in North America, and there was a North American interfaith network in existence, which we joined. But internationally, there were many fewer organizations. There was the World Conference on Religion and Peace, which had been recently founded. There was the Temple of Understanding in New York. And then the International Association for Religious Freedom, which is the oldest international interfaith organization, and which itself was founded in Boston really as a result of the 1893 Parliament. The people who started the IARF were inspired by 1893. But each international organization that existed, and I think you could really count them on the fingers of one hand in 1993, it had a different sort of specialization or a different focus. And we joined them, and we began meeting we met in England and in the United States with the representatives of all the various organizations. Today, of course, many more are in existence, and it's a good thing.